Welcome back to The Distressed Princess. I'm Rhonda. Can you believe that it's already halfway through the year 2023? So in today's video, I'm bringing you my top favorite, very simple and easy DIYs so far this year. For the first DIY, I chose to use these front and back covers from these books. From my last video, I only used the books, but I said keep these wonderful colored fronts and backs that I tore off because I would craft with them later. Well, here's the craft. I'm using 4 pieces of the book covers and I cut off their raggedy edges. And I wanted to be able to print on them, so they're gonna have to go through my printer. So I used some printer paper and I'm going to use some double-sided tape to attach each of the covers to the printer paper so it'll go through my printer. And in the Canva program, I made these garden tags or these flashcard things, which I will link in my description box below if you want to make these for yourself. So after I had them all printed out on their separate little papers, then I had to cut them out. I used the paper cutter to get straight cuts, and then I used my scissors to go around those curved corners. I'm so glad that I kept hold of those book covers, that I tore off those books, because they really are the perfect aged paper to make these flashcards. So here's how the first DIY turned out, my sweet little tags in my sweet little lavender arrangement. This next little project is so neat. I love it. So they have these wood slices, what they're calling wood slices, but I think they're more like wood pegs. So you need 2 of the wood pegs. Make sure they're not split and they are in good condition. And you'll also need one of these slices of woods. Now, this is not the Dollar Tree Plus section. This is regular Dollar Tree stuff. So $1.25 for the bag of the pegs and $1.25 for this slice of wood. Now I'm going to make a hat hanger. So I'm using 2 pegs and I'm going to mark out where I think the 2 pegs should go in relation to the center of this slice of wood. So this one I think was what, 9.5 inches long. So I placed the 2 pegs at 2 inches and 7 inches. Where I made the marks for the pegs, I pre-drilled 2 small holes using a very small drill bit because it's going to take a very small screw to go in these pegs. So you want to use a small drill bit, you need to use small screws and make small holes. Then very slowly and very carefully with that tiny drill bit, do a small hole in the center of your pegs. Then put your screw in through the back of the piece of wood. And then attach your wood peg to the screw by twisting it on. And there you have a hat hanger or a wreath hanger or a whatever you want hanger. First DIY is this neat spoon decoration, and I got this idea from Julie's Designs and Signs. She's one of my favorite YouTubers. I searched in my shed for an old sign that I could repurpose, and I found this block of wood decoration, and I also thrifted these antique aluminum spoons. This decoration originally came from a store called Burke's, but they may have things like this at TJ Maxx or Ross, or even use just a spare old piece of wood you have. The first thing I did was take the spoons off of the ring that they usually come on, and I used a pair of needle nose pliers to pry that ring apart so the spoons would come off. They're going to go on the sign just like this, and Julie hot glued hers, and you could absolutely hot glue yours too, but in case I ever wanted to use this for a actual spoon hanger and I wanted to use the spoons, I'm going to use these cup hooks. Next, I painted over the words of the sign with white chalk paint. It took about 3 coats. I used my hair dryer to dry up the chalk paint so it got a little antique-y crackle to it. Then I realized I had a decision to make. The spoons could go like this on the board, or I could turn the board the other way around where the fatter trim at the bottom would be at the top and hang it the other way. And ultimately, I decided I liked the second way better. I'm going to pre-drill some holes for the cup hooks to go into, so I used a black marker to mark where I'll be drilling holes. I used the tiniest drill bit that I had that would match the little screw on the cup hooks, and I didn't drill all the way through. I just drilled a little bit so that the cup hooks could have a good start and I could screw them in the rest of the way with my fingers. Now my cup hooks were gold or brass, so I wanted to paint them a color that would match more with my art piece. So I'm painting them with some pewter gray. While my hooks were drying, I decided to add some sawtooth hangers to the back of the project, so if I wanted to hang it on the wall, it could hang, or this block is chunky enough it can stand up on its own. Then I flipped her back over. My hooks were dry, and I added the hooks to my pre-drilled holes and hung the spoons. Now that we've got the hang of it, let's try something a little different. I'm using this wooden heart that I've had in my craft stash for some time, and now I have the perfect reason to use it. So with this one, I'm using another of the mini Valentine's Day stencils that comes in a 6-pack, and I'm going to do something different with this one. Instead of using chalk paint, I decided I wanted this to look like the design was burned into the wood, kind of like an engraving. So instead of chalk paint, I'm going to use Waverly antiquing wax. And again, I'm using a stencil brush, and these are included in the bundle in my description box, so you'll be all set to do your stencils. Now, I dipped just a little bit into just the lid of that antiquing wax, and then I'm brushing off as much of it as I can. You want this to be a really dry brush because the antiquing wax is a little runnier than chalk paint, so you don't want very much on your brush at all. But I promise the least little amount will show up on a lighter color wood like this. And again, I'm just using small little circle swirly motions to go all over the stencil. Take all the tape off except maybe the top piece and leave it down and do a little peekaboo and see if you got all the areas that you needed to get, which again, I was very happy. I love that reveal. Oh, that's my favorite one. Peel it all the way off. Don't forget, put your stencil into the pan of water that you have prepared so that will be easier to clean up later. And the next part is optional. I didn't do it in the first project because I didn't see that it really needed it. But if you look closely, you can see where the stencils kind of have a little gap. So you can take a small little paintbrush and your paint, or in this case, the antiquing wax, and fill in those little tiny gaps so that they're all smoothed over. And that's it. She is stunning. Nothing says farmhouse like a basket of eggs. So here are some eggs that are just crafting eggs. They're not real, but I would encourage you to do this DIY with real eggs, preferably real country eggs that are brown. But I don't have any brown country eggs, so I'm going to paint some of my eggs. So I'll have some white and some brown. And the only way I could think to do that would be to water down a little bit of brown paint and just paint it on. And then I kind of wiped it back away, hoping that it would make it look more natural and not like painted eggs. They wound up a little bit splotchy, but as I've seen before in the past, some country eggs are splotchy, so I think they look pretty natural. Now the technique that I'm really here to show you is the stamping of the eggs. I don't know if you have bought any country eggs from anyone in a while, but some people have begun stamping their eggs and they have personalized stamps made with whatever they want their little eggs to say. But I just bought this stamp at Hobby Lobby. It was $2.99. It had a little chicken on it. And I already had my ink, but you can pick that up at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, or any craft store. And oh my gosh, how it elevates these little eggs. I loved stamping these eggs, and I want to stamp all of my eggs that come in my house. So when I open up my refrigerator and see my little eggs sitting there, how adorable would that be? And I wound up with a headless chicken. I had to go back and try to stamp his head on, but turned out okay. And the basket that I'm using for my eggs is a thrifted one. It was only $1. And I also decided that I wanted it to have some sort of a little linen or a tea towel, something inside the basket. So I looked and found a tea towel that I stamped last year in a spring video, and I'm going to use that with this DIY. If you want to see how I stamped this tea towel, then down in my description box below, I will link that video. And I think that was a really cute video. That had a lot of cute spring ideas. So definitely watch that video that I have linked, or I will also link it at the end of this video too. The next DIY is not using a thrifted item, but instead these pots from the Dollar Tree. You get 4 of them for $1.25. And even though they're not a thrifted item, they are going to look vintage when we're done with them and go along with our vintage thrifted DIYs. And this one is so super simple, guys. Just grab some white chalk paint and just roughly paint that on. It's not going to stick in all the places, and honestly you don't want it to, because the color that these pots are to start with is going to show through, and it's gonna look vintage and cute even with just one little layer of chalk paint. And on this one you want to paint the insides too. Next step is to add some dirtiness to them, because they want to look like they've been used and they've been out in the weather. So I'm using some Waverly chalk paint in the color Truffle, and it's going to be very watered down. I'm first going to dip my brush into water and then into just the lid of the Truffle chalk paint, and I'm going to do a very watery mixture of that paint and then put it onto the pots and dab it off with a paper towel. And I love the effect that this gives. After it's all dried up, they definitely look like old weathered pots. Now I'm going to fix up some eggs to put inside one of the little pots. And this speckled egg garland came from the Dollar Tree. I liked it because they were the smaller size eggs and they already have speckles. The only trouble is they're too brightly colored to go with our vintage decorations, so we're going to remedy that by giving them a whitewash. I removed a couple of the blue eggs and a couple of the white eggs, and to give them the whitewash, I dipped my brush into some water and then into my white chalk paint and just brushed it right on the eggs.
And that makes a huge difference. They're so much cuter with their colors a little muted and goes so much better with these pots. So now I'm going to build a little nest inside of the pot, and the only thing that I'm going to use is some moss. So I hot glue the moss inside just one little edge of the pot, and then I hot glue the eggs in place in the nest. So for a couple of bucks, boy, you could make a lot of these and put them all over. Next farmhouse DIY is using this enamelware pot that I thrifted for only a couple bucks at a junk store, and I love the shape of this one and that it has two handles. So I'm going to turn it into a planter pot, and so I'll be starting with some floral foam in the bottom from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to cover the floral foam with some moss. But I really had on my mind I wanted some dirt, and I wish I could have just went outside and got some real dirt, because I think that would have looked really neat, because it's not just any flowers that I'm going to use in this planter pot. It's going to be herbs, and I wanted them to look like they were coming up out of dirt. And so if you have something that can be used as dirt, or if you have dirt or potting soil would be great, then I would probably go for that. But for what I had on hand, I'm just going with the moss. And here's the greenery that I'm calling herbs. Now, you could absolutely plant real herbs, and if you have a green thumb, you go right for that. Everything I plant dies, so I have to use fake. And I sort of thought that these ones from the Dollar Tree looked like thyme. I looked up pictures of thyme, and I thought that it looked a lot like thyme, so I just planted them right down in my pot into the floral foam so that they were nice and secure. And then I'm using one of those chalkboard planter pick things from the Dollar Tree and a white paint pen to write the word thyme so that everyone knows what this fake plant is supposed to be. And oh my gosh, I just love it so much that I'm keeping this one. The next DIY is one of those simpler the better DIYs, and I gathered up these antique bottles, and they were only about $2 a piece at my antique store. I got some clear ones with the little measurements marked out on them, and I got some blue ones, and oh my gosh, how I love antique bottles. They're just cute as can be, just the way they are. They really don't need any adornment, but I'm going to dress them up anyway. I have this whole bag of scrapbooking papers that I've collected over the years, different kinds of ephemera, and so I'm going to pick out some of the floral ones to put onto these bottles like labels. I'm using my homemade Mod Podge, which is just watered down white school glue, but you could use store-bought Mod Podge to glue these little pieces onto the bottles. here they are after drying all night, and I decided to add one more little embellishment, which is this little burlap ribbon that I got at the Dollar Tree. I'm going to hot glue little pieces of this just around the necks of the bottles. And I really wanted some fresh, real flowers to put in these bottles, but it's February and nowhere in my little small town could I buy any fresh flowers, and there's no wildflowers blooming yet either. So I had to go with artificial, so I picked the little tiniest ones I could find in my stash that looked like little wildflowers, and I put them in the bottles. Well, I bet you're wondering what it was that was sitting on the ledge I just made, and I'll show you how I made those little items. This is a table leg from that store, and the first thing I thought I needed to remove the little thing on the bottom, which was metal, because I want to be able to drill a hole in the center. So at first I tried to pull it out with these pliers, but it wouldn't budge. So then my next idea kicked in. I got out my handsaw and I just sawed off the very end. And then I sanded it so that it wouldn't look like a fresh cut. Sorry, I got a little out of frame here, but I just picked a medium-sized drill bit and drilled a hole right into the center, quite a bit of ways down, so that I could stick some flower stems down in there. And the other piece is an old garden hose nozzle. So I really liked the color that this was already, but since my little table leg piece was brown, I wanted this to be a contrasting color since it's going to sit on the ledge that I just made. So I decided to paint this up with some white chalk paint, but like I said in the first DIY, this is another reason why I just love doing this sort of stuff, because you don't have to be perfect with your painting. You get to really have fun and just glob it on in places and sporadically just stipple it on and let it take its own artistic form. I used these flowers from the Dollar Tree, and I really love how this whole entire project turned out. The next 5-minute craft is another bird bath, but it's a smaller version. These are also pieces that I picked up at the Goodwill store, and I'm going to stack them up just like what you're going to see me do here. I'm going to use the same silicone to attach them all together. And update on the silicone, I have had the other one put together for several days now. It has been hot at my house, it has rained at my house, and it's all still holding great. So believe me when I say I did my research in figuring out what kind of adhesive to use to put these together, and everyone said silicone was the way to go. So skip the E6000 on these projects and go and get you some of this silicone. It is a little bit more expensive, but well worth it when you're building these bird baths. I put another fountain in this one, and these are adjustable as to how much water that they're putting out like this, but it encourages you to refresh the water every couple of days so they're clean for your birds. Comment and let me know if you made it all the way to my #1 favorite DIY, which was this bird bath. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll be back next week with some brand new DIYs for you. And until then, I'll see you next time. Bye!